Hi, everyone. And thanks to the History Workshop for having me. So this paper is very much still slightly a work in progress. It's coming out of my PhD and on route to being published, hopefully soon. As you can see, we are claiming space, we are visible, solidarity, constitutional rights, and the making of the Gay and Lesbian Organization of the Witwatersrand 1980s to the 1990s. And what I'm trying to do in this paper is highlight ideas and notions of solidarity and visibility, and specifically queer solidarity and how it works on an organizational level, looking at GLOW and OLGA. OLGA is the Organization of Lesbian and Gay Activists. So I look at how they've worked together to start pushing for gay and lesbian rights inclusion in the final constitution in 1996. They work in opening meetings with the ANC and other political parties towards the end of apartheid and into the post-apartheid era. So that's the organizational level. And then in terms of visibility, the paper is trying to explore how gay and lesbians claim visibility starting in Johannesburg. So obviously the paper is looking in Johannesburg through the pride marches, very political pride marches starting in 1990. Kind of the coming out of the gay and lesbian population, making themselves seen for the first time in the country in a really visible way. So yeah, this paper is just trying to highlight those. And the paper starts with looking at a bit of Nkoti's time in prison. It's a bit small up there, but that's basically some of Nkoti's diary entries written on toilet paper while he was in prison. The specific one, he's speaking about how he's missing his boyfriend of the time, Roy Shepherd, but also at the same time, he's starting to envision a post-apartheid South Africa where the country is free and open for everyone, regardless of sexuality, gender, race, all of that. So Nkoti starts to think about, I mean, he's been thinking about it beforehand, but in prison is when he really starts to like write it down. So Simon Nkoti, who eventually goes on to found GLOW, is arrested and charged in 1984 for speaking and charged with treason for speaking in rallies supporting rent boycotts in the Vaal. But when he's arrested, the Gay Association of South Africa, the organization he's with at the time, completely refuses to support him in his arrest, in his trial, in anything. They basically just cut ties with him completely. And he writes to his boyfriend, quote, "Gaza has done nothing for me since I was arrested," end quote. And he's really starting to highlight his anger with Gaza, which at the time is very white, very apolitical, and just wants nothing to do with him. And while in prison, he's also starting to think about what a gay organization would look like if it was political, if it was cross-racial. And he starts writing down ideas for a non-racial, a political gay and lesbian organization. And he sends these letters to Roy. And you can see in the letters how he's growing excited about the idea of a political gay organization, which will fight for all human rights, which Gaza at the time was just not doing. Yeah. So the reason I like to highlight Nkoti's time in Dalmas isn't because it's a time when Nkoti's politicized, but it's in a time when Nkoti starts to see that gay organizing can and should be political and should be cross-racial and shouldn't just be a single agenda kind of issue, which is what Gaza was initially pushing. That's Simon Nkoti. Oh, it's my face in the way. There we go. So he's released from prison and almost immediately starts working alongside Bev Ditsi to set up a kind of cross-racial gay and lesbian political organization. And these meetings were held in a shebeen called Lee's Shebeen in Soweto, which has a history of being quite a gay-friendly shebeen. but there's a realization that they have to move the meetings to Brom to really get across racial grouping, because many white people don't want to actually travel into Soweto at the time. And there was a strong belief that GLOW should be for both whites and Black citizens. And so the organization has its first meeting out here in Wits on the 9th of April, 1988, and immediately states that they want to be non-homophobic, non-racist, and non-sexist, and as a space for all gays and lesbians in and around Johannesburg. And the organization also immediately aligns itself with anti-apartheid ideologies and groups such as the ANC and the UDF. So one of the large drawing points for GLOW was that it was a racially inclusive space. The organization was constantly 60% Black, due in large parts to creating chapters in townships throughout the Witwatersrand. The annual general meeting was also hosted in Soweto every year, which was followed by the highly anticipated Miss GLOW drag competition, which had lots of support from gay and non-gay people. Basically just became a large party, a yearly party, which did show that there was a thriving gay scene in the townships. But it was overall the progressive, anti-racist, cross-racial demographics that helped GLOW reach various South Africans from all backgrounds. And throughout my research, many people I've interviewed have said that it was GLOW's politics, not necessarily that they were a gay organization, but that they were gay, but also political, that drew them to GLOW, which was not seen anywhere before. Previous organizations were focused largely on creating social spaces for white gay men. GLOW was the complete opposite. So GLOW managed to maintain these progressive ideals through 1988 into the 90s. And it's those ideals and GLOW's notions of creating solidarity that gets them starting to work with OLGA, a Cape Town-based organization. And then OLGA had links to the ANC at the time. So OLGA opens communications to the ANC with GLOW in the late 80s and the early 90s, following quite a bombshell report in 1987, which saw a few international high-ranking ANC members spur some homophobic remarks, saying gay rights is a separate agenda and shouldn't be part of an anti-apartheid agenda, a policy fight, that they're two separate agendas, which is similar to what was heard a few decades previously with women's rights movements. So you kind of just see how those arguments started to shift from women's rights into gay rights, that it's just that there's a belief that they shouldn't be entwined with the anti-apartheid agenda. But OLGA overall had a good relationship with Nkosi following his release from prison, but the organization itself was mostly white and mostly male, much like Gaza before, but the difference was it was liberal and relatively political. But I have had previous interviewees, largely Black and colored women, who said that even when they did try and join OLGA, they did feel a sense of ostracization. Largely, partially racial, partially gendered. And that when they joined GLOW, it was very different and they felt a lot more included in what was going on in GLOW. So yeah, it's this relationship to push for gay rights for all that allows GLOW and OLGA to keep a close working relationship through the 1990s. And then my paper is also looking at Pride, which is first hosted in 1990 as Africa's first ever gay Pride, which is very important because it's, as I said earlier, it's gay and lesbian people coming out and showing their visibility to the rest of the country, showing that they exist, showing that they are actually there and showing that they are there in large numbers and not just a quiet minority. And them coming out into Pride is this mass mobilization in the country. And it largely builds on GLOW's need and desire to show that gays and lesbians are not just going to be silent, that they are there for a political purpose and a political cause, and that they want recognition. At the beginning of that first Pride March, Nkosi kind of expressed exactly what GLOW was in a speech where he says, quote, "I am Black and I am gay. I cannot separate the two parts of me into secondary or primary struggles," end quote. So that's what GLOW is. It's a struggle for gay rights and Black rights and human rights in general in the country. And Pride allowed gays and lesbians to actually show that they're there. And also Black gays and lesbians. The march was through the CBD, and many Black gays and lesbians attended as well, which again, prior to Pride, it was just perceived that it's a white middle class issue. So a part that is also important is OLGA and GLOW working together. And I think this is, OLGA and GLOW working together to form the National Coalition for Gay and Lesbian Equality, which is a coalition that is formed in order to gain support from all organizations in the country, gay and lesbian organizations in the country, or as many as possible, who want to see that sexual equality, sexual freedom is inserted into the new constitution following the ANC's 1994 victory. And through this, it's to show that it's not just a small minority, it's many people who see the anti-apartheid struggle as being in line with progressive human rights struggle for all. So yeah, this is the part where it's a little bit iffy, and I'm still kind of working towards what the NCGLE really does represent. And GLOW and OLGA do have a bit of a fractious relationship, but it's the NCGLE and this drive to just work towards a common goal that actually keeps organizational gay politics kind of in line in this late apartheid, early democratic era. I think I'm finished quite early.
That's fine.
Lovely.
Questions, would like to start. But while there's looking for questions, I read your paper and thoroughly enjoyed it, like I did before the seminar. And I was wondering if you could kind of expand on a claim that's made in the paper that the LGBTQI community was something of a scapegoat for liberal racists in the time, right? So being associated with the gays and the lesbians by white liberal racists at the time was a thing that I really like you to expand on. I don't know if you want to help those questions. I don't know if I'm multiple, but
anyone who's also online, please feel free to share your questions in the chat, and then I will read them out to our speaker. Thanks.
Please don't drop it, guys. It's not insurance.
The cola nut in West Africa. Yeah, so interesting paper. I just had a question about, maybe you could expand where you talk about senior ANC officials, Ruth Mompati, Solly Smith, sort of being homophobic in the late 80s. I just want to challenge you a little bit. Do you think that was blind homophobia, or there's more to that? And also another reference, in Hugh Macmillan's book, The Lusaka Years, towards the end, he talks about a social welfare conference that was in Lusaka in the late 80s, after 87, where Adelaide Tambo is talking about problems within the ANC in exile. But one of the things she raises as a problem, right, is that there were apparently growing numbers of gays and lesbians in the ANC in exile. So she saw it as a problem that late after this expose. And also perhaps maybe this is not the focus of your paper, but what was AIDS and HIV at the back of their minds, perhaps? What role did that play at this time? Thanks.
Let's pass it. Anyone have another question? Okay. Okay, so I hope everyone there can hear as well. Muting this one. Mute this one. So the way I look at the idea of white liberal racists, it's they almost are saying, look, we support gays and lesbians. We're doing good for one community. Doesn't matter what's happening with other communities. But we're doing our good. It's like kind of general liberalism you see in like 2008 in the US, when gays are suddenly given their own rights over there, but there's still this large contingency of racism going on there. That's kind of how I view Gaza and pre-Glow gay politics. It's we'll look out for ourselves. We'll look out for this one progressive ideal, but we'll ignore all the other human rights violations going on with the apartheid government. Hope that is good. I think it's a small cohort of ANC officials who express homophobic concerns. I'm not necessarily saying they're homophobic, but the way they express concerns about the gay issue doesn't need to be addressed yet. We can do that later. That started to cause a bit of international worry, because you'd see other post-colonial states suddenly crack down on gay and lesbian rights and just say, no, we don't want it. The 90s is also this time when you have Mugabe, for example, saying they are worse than dogs and pigs. We don't care for them. We'll just let them suffer, and trying to just completely excommunicate gays and lesbians. So there was this, there's a realization that this is the perfect time to get queer rights aligned with the struggle, because there's an idea that if they aren't in it together, they're just going to continue to be seen as an illegal group, that they're constantly going to be criminalized if they're not in the constitution, and it's going to be tougher to get them in a new constitution a few years down the line. So it's just challenging like those ideals, those ideas. Yeah, the book you mentioned, I'd like to see it. I'm sure I have come across, but I can't recall right now. But yeah, it would be interesting for me to actually just look in on that and touch on that. And yeah, HIV is not part of this paper at all, but obviously it's very important. It's an ongoing crisis, but you do have, so as I said, this is part of my PhD, so I am looking at how GLOW is reacting to the HIV/AIDS crisis, and it's largely through working with like the Township AIDS Project, and a lot of GLOW's senior members, Simon Cordy, Bev Ditzy, are working in clinics, alongside people in clinics, to just spread awareness, and they're getting the community, the organization, to just spread awareness, specifically in townships around Joburg, just to say, look, it's a problem we all have to be aware of. Here's how we practice safe sex. Here's how we just try and be aware that it is a problem and that we should actually work to solve it. Yeah.
I will be reading it. I've got two questions for you, and they're both kind of selfish in a way because of our hopefully soon future collaborative work, which is going to be looking at the role of T-shirts in Pride marches. But you mentioned that one of the kind of aims and objectives of this paper is to explore the question of visibility, how GLOW seeks to make itself and its members and their sort of identity and agenda visible. And I'd just like to challenge you to think deeper and more critically about what this visibility actually means. Visible for who, and visible towards what end, because you can think about sort of the need to be visible to distinguish a particular separate identity, but visibility can also, in a sense, ironically, be about integration and belonging as well. So just to kind of think deeper and more critically about what this visibility means. And of course, it's not just visibility in the visual sense, but it's also, as you emphasized, visibility in terms of being heard, in terms of policy, as parts of the kind of new nation building project. And then linked to that, of course, is my directly selfish question, which is, what role do you think that T-shirts played in helping to set up and establish and claim that visibility, particularly during the Pride marches?
Thanks, Annie. I don't know if there are any other questions. I have one or two that I would like to kind of squeeze in here before you respond. The first is on solidarity, right? The notion of solidarity, and you speak about solidarity between Gaza and GLOW and these other kind of gay and lesbian rights organizations, but I'm curious about what that looked like beyond the LGBTQI community. And I suppose in a way this links to these liberal racists that are for gay rights, right? So what does solidarity look like in terms of, I suppose, allyship amongst, you know, people who aren't necessarily part of this community and who are more of a heteronormative affiliation? So that's my first question. And then in the paper, you kind of, I don't know if problematizing it is the right word, but you speak about Pride, you know, progressively beyond that first march in 1990 becoming less political and more about celebrations, right? And I wonder if you could perhaps expand on that. I think this links to, you know, the high level of attendance at events like Miss Glow, but not necessarily the other political events. How do you think perhaps this hindered, you know, the progress in terms of what Glow was trying to achieve? This kind of romanticization, I suppose, of the gay and lesbian community. Yeah, those are my two questions. I don't know if there are any others. Yes, Prof. Noor. Do you want to respond, or would you like to take his question as well?
I'll wait.
Okay. So you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay,
It's going to be easier to walk in all of us.
I'm just going to assume that
I did unmute, yeah.
So I've got a few kind of comments, questions, and I was thinking of how to pose them. So I'm going to attach, I think, my main question to the issues raised by Annie on visibility, but I want to focus it on the political aspects. So it seems to me that one of the things that you've got to do is, if we take sort of Annie's framing about what you mean by visibility, how that functioned in different spaces, sort of in the public realm, but also in the political realm, and how GLOW defined its politics and how it operated within political movements and organizations in order to not only render themselves as people visible, but also to make the politics more visible. Right? That required work to be done. And so there are different ways of thinking about that. One of it is, perhaps controversially, depending on where one stands on this, is to say that what GLOW was doing, was to in fact mobilize identity politics in a context in which identity politics was not the thing to do. So on the one hand, you argue that GLOW was making a claim around non-racialism, which has a particular sort of approach to identity politics. Okay, in a context of the late 1980s, of the emergence of the mass democratic movement, a particular kind of politics that became predominant from the late 1980s. And then in the early 1990s, what you're suggesting is GLOW very deliberately and importantly shifting towards a constitutional approach in which the interests of a particular group identified through their sexual orientation, etc., etc. So it's again about identity politics. So the issue there for me is, but it's also framed within constitutionalism, right? It's about what is democracy. And so I wanted to think about the sort of politics espoused by the people in GLOW. So you have sort of high-profile people who are leading jurists, right? Leading legal minds, who are kind of driving a particular direction. Yeah. In order with a focus on the Constitution. But there are also other things happening, other aspects of politics. And so it's about I'm just using kind of your word and Annie's kind of elaboration of visibility, how are these different aspects of the politics being negotiated, made visible in different parts of political society. Not only the constitutional process, because there are intense debates happening. It's not as if the constitutional road, which becomes an important focus, is the only political, it's not the only politics, there are various other things happening. So, and when you presented your proposal, I asked you the question about how you would define GLOW. Okay. Because here again, you've said, Simon wanted to create an organization that was very deliberately political. And I think that's an important part of its definition. But what else is it? Because it's not only that kind of narrow politics. And I think that you need to give some attention to kind of thinking conceptually about GLOW. The issue that I raised with you, not suggesting that this is the definition that you need to attach to GLOW, but just thinking through, potential ideas or conceptualization, is about GLOW as a network, a social movement. And again, this not only draws on broader social movement kind of literature and theorization, but also how gay and lesbian organizations internationally imagine themselves as social movements. Right? rather, and social movements, lobby groups. Okay? And so I think that you need to give some kind of consideration to that. I was very, so part of the context which I think you need to give attention to, I'm sorry, I didn't read the paper, so maybe then if it is in the paper, just kind of dismiss my question. There's another important debate taking place, set of debates around gender and feminism. And so this relates in part to your comment about the ANC, because while there were homophobic comments, there's a very deliberate, very concerted effort by feminists to kind of shift the ANC in a particular direction, which again manifests itself in the Constitution. And I think that you need to see these two processes running adjacent to each other and try and get a sense of how they inform each other's politics. Because there are many people in each of those constituencies who influence the politics of each other.
Yeah.
So I think that you need to bring the gender debates, the debates around feminism more centrally into your discussion about GLOW, both in the late 80s and in the early 90s. I think that will give it a broader context about the evolution of these politics. Okay, thanks. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Do you want to respond?
Yeah.
Quite a mouthful there. Take your time.
So let me just start on the last point, because it is the point that excites me the most. So it's not in this paper, the gender and feminism, but I know for a fact is actually going on at the time. Large swaths of GLOW's lesbian members are actually, to put it lightly, irritated with GLOW's almost very male-centric point of views on what gayness is. So they go and they start, it's linked to GLOW, but it's a bit of a side part, the Lesbian Forum, which is very much there to find out what the feminist and lesbian and issues that are affecting women in the organization that aren't being spoken about in the organization. They speak about it in the side, in the Lesbian Forum, so that they can bring it into GLOW through their own leadership over there. So it's so Bev just sees a part of that a little bit, but and a lot of them learn their feminisms from international scenes. Some of them one of them comes from Germany. So it's a small group of about 20 women. One comes from Germany, one comes from Boston, and they bring these Western notions of feminism into the organization to raise just amongst women, but also the major issues that GLOW are ignoring that affect women. So corrective rapes are large at the time, and GLOW is not really addressing that. They're trying to address issues that are more geared towards male homosexuality. So the feminism is brought in, but it's in another paper of mine and not in this one. So yeah, I wanted to bring it into this one, but time and word limits are not fun. How do I define GLOW? It's constantly changing. I do see it largely as a social movement. I think is the right one, but one that is geared towards like organizational politics. I don't know. It changes depending on where I'm standing and looking at it each time. And I think they try and present themselves very much as we are this activist group, but it's not always the case. It is a lot of the times just there are times when it is just a bit of a social scene and just trying to make people aware that gays and lesbians deserve rights. So yeah, it changes. You said a lot. But yeah, I am trying to be aware of what they're doing outside the Constitution. I know that there are other politics going at play. I hope that answers some of what you've asked. I think it does. And yeah, I think I just want to agree that GLOW does have different notions of visibility in the public and in the political space, and they are, I do think they're aware of how they make themselves seen in each different one. Yeah. Just trying to see where the notes are. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. While you do that, I just want to remind the people that are joining us online that they're free to ask questions in the chat box.
Oh, there is a chat there.
Uh-huh. And okay, we'll take your question. Do you want to respond to some of the other questions, or should we take another one? I think it's just Aaron who has.
Yeah, let me just on the t-shirts and visibility. There's an interesting bit of a conundrum in the first Glow March, in that a lot of the members are given paper masks, paper bags to wear as masks. So it's also kind of the invisible but visible. They're keeping themselves hidden but still making their bodies seen. But on their bodies are these t-shirts, which we have looked at, and the t-shirts very much say, we're gay and we're here. And I think if you didn't know what the march was, I think the t-shirts are there to help show what the visibility, to show what was going on. Yeah, definitely something we have thoughts about. It's just not coming to my mind right now, but they are used to show what's going on and to show that, like, who's taking part in all of this. Yeah. Yeah. I was too busy thinking about what's going on here. Did I miss anyone? Oh, yes. With allyship. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, that's allyship is an important part in any kind of politics, or even, yeah, it's needed. You're not going to get your cause really addressed without any forms of allyship. So I think my ways of looking at that is, and I might have to make it a bit more clearer in the paper, because it's a great word to throw in, is their communications with ANC members who are, for the most part, heteronormative men, few women. But it's men that they have to get on side onto a gay rights issue. And the way they're doing it in the late 80s and early 90s isn't saying, hey, you have to be an ally to gay rights. It's, hey, you have to be an ally to human rights. So kind of throw gay rights in with human rights, and they can't deny that towards the end of apartheid. It just doesn't work. So that's kind of how they look at it in that, yeah. Okay, great.
Aaron, I think you had and I mean, I see lots of stuff thing, and I think maybe girl definition needs to be fluid, because it's not really defined one thing to the point, because it's so many different things. But then you're even expand on this, what we did the girl primarily social organization. When I am confused, it's around, you kind of think it's a gay social organization that says that the men have decided the apolitical. I think incorporating the social organization, I think the term might be interesting. I think just like a frame issue, because
Agreed. I realized it the second I said it that the phrasing is off. A lot of Glow is social. And I mean, the social aspect is needed to actually kind of bring people together. But in those social spaces, there are political ideas being exchanged and ideas of what people want in the gay rights movement. So socialness, social movement, social whatever in Glow is kind of the way to bring people together. And in those spaces is where ideas develop and take shape and move. And then that's taken out into speeches out on the street and into speeches in courts. So yeah, it's a mixture of various different ways of how the organization can be defined. I don't know how it's defined. I'm still trying to figure that out. Yeah.
It's important to know the confused in using the discussion.
Yeah.
There's certainly it's not a third party.
Yeah.
The participation is, which is primarily political.
Okay. Okay.
That's scholarship that we have to get into. And I think you're right to say that, as the research unfolds, you may change your mind. And you may decide it's not what this period can do. But it's part of the process.
Yeah.
I'm constantly thinking about, particularly in PhD, you want to have some conceptual kind of framing for this. That's really decided. And now there is
Yeah.
not probably consistent with what it is.
Yeah.
But if you can think about what is moving on, are they self-defined? Also, what kind of conceptual tools could be used? In a way that was unseen.
Yeah. And I just to add on, I don't think they did bring the public with. I think large portions of the public are still not in support of gay rights in the Constitution, of gay rights in general. And you also see it within a lot of the current gay population won't go to police if they're harassed or attacked, because they know they'll still be attacked or abused again by police. And that's still an ongoing issue. And I don't know how to fix that. I think GLOW was, at least this is what members have told me, GLOW members said, okay, cool, Constitution is done, we can pack up and go, we've done what we have to do. So GLOW starts to decline after 96. I think 99, 2000, the organization is really gone. But it's because they think, okay, we've got our rights written down on paper, but those rights are never actually taught to a larger population. People aren't made aware of their rights. And I think, yeah, a large portion of the population is still largely homophobic.
I think that there is someone who's addressing your question about social movements. I mean, it seemed to me as though they were kind of directed and close to the thing.
Yeah.
And did they? How effective, how widespread was it? And I think it's just strikes me. It carries the contradiction.
Yeah, another potential theoretical framework potentially to think about would be Bharat Chatterjee's work coming out of liberalizing India in the 1990s around this difference between political society and civil society. And I think Prof. Noor was sort of alluding to that a little bit with the question of international organizations, but if GLOW is maybe more of an elite civil society organization, they might effectively be able to negotiate wins in the Constitution or something, but are they kind of engaging the mass movements of the broad public? And so I guess it's a question that I have, and I don't know anything about this answer, but to what extent was GLOW working with international civil society that was active in the transition time?
It's a big question. I'm still looking at who GLOW is working with internationally. That is ongoing research. Because I know they do have a fair amount of international support. But it's hidden behind various bank account numbers that I can't, that I'm actually trying to find exactly who. Some organizations are very open about supporting GLOW. But there are, I think, a few, and I think it is an ongoing issue of homophobia, where they don't actively, where they're not outright saying we support GLOW. And a lot of the support comes through financially rather than verbal support. So it's yeah, I'm looking into that. It's ongoing.
We need to take another round of questions and comments or suggestions. And this is the comments building on what Clive was saying. And I wonder if at the moment speaking about these two kinds of objectives of GLOW, on one hand, institutional agenda, and on the other hand, the sort of acceptance within the broader public has been kind of a dichotomous. And I wonder if perhaps that's not the right way of understood it. I wonder if perhaps they saw constitutional acceptance as a way into kind of creating public acceptance.
That's what I think they thought would have happened. I think there was this idea of, okay, we've got our legal rights, we'll be fine.
And they can use that sorry, Mr. Bologna, I think that, I mean, these issues that consist of the day, I think that, you probably are in this institutional rights. And we still seem to get in first. So actually, if you see technology, something who retire and then was ultimately using the constitution, they find it something a lot of work. And actually being involved often part of that. And then we kind of say to the environment and practice. And so I think we think we're in a constant difference because we actually can't rely on the support of the humans. And I think that's interesting. I think we can also start with the personal or social. Anytime you're looking here, that's a public space. That's immediately personal act. And so I think that's also what makes it so difficult to separate the idea of the kind of social movement from a more socializing party movement. Because they go hand in hand, actually can't be separated. And I think that we should embrace that we want from the religion mission. Rather than seek to try and classify those and others, which I think we should really do. And I think that we're positioned today. I think in this article, the other name is exactly one out of the Johannesburg pride. When you look at empowerment, who recognizes a lot of selection pride. They do around their job. There's safe education camps, there's AIDS, system, their parents have out Joburg city getting hold of but it is also a part, and it is also a celebration. And so I think what you begin to do is trying to explain to the average straight person what that experience is in the paper. And I think you begin to do very well by embracing the kind of unknown, because it's a condition that everyone can understand. And I think that's made even clearer or sharper difference, particularly for our Black queer brothers and sisters. And so I think that these unknowns that people are starting to question why they're reading the paper are almost like important answers that the paper gives.
So I just want to reinforce that I think that that's a brilliant approach and not to feel insecure to provide any definitions.
Thank you. I do just want to say on the power and few, a lot of the members in there also did come out of GLOW.
Yes.
So that's why I think
Especially
they,
the lesbian forum.
yeah, Lesbian Forum members had a lot to do with how I think more than few, one of them, can't remember. So I do think that's also why you still do see a bit more of that like political intersectionality in the Soweto Pride, as opposed to
Absolutely.
carnivalesque one that moved into Rosebank.
We're here, we're white, but we don't really want to walk in the
Yeah.
streets.
I did, but I think it might be more relevant to talk about it after than here. So never mind.
So no question, no comment. Okay.
Stuff you'd like to add, given the discussion that just ensued.
My closing remarks are thank you, everyone. It was wonderful.
I think that we have negotiated that practically.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've had quite a few PhDs, you know, people located in the spaces, and being the PhDs, specifically related to those spaces. So PhD is a PhD as an academic.
Yeah.
It's not a political process. You can keep that in mind.
I've been trying to. I like to think I have been.
I mean, just artificial visibility, right? And you notice.
Yeah.
I think you shouldn't underestimate the support.
Yeah.
That people got, or that those marches got in the late 1990s. The first march was fully support. The second and third march was much bigger. Right? And that was part because of what was happening in the OLGA. More and more activist organizations setting up in the OLGA. The unions, for example, the same one the members tried, the main voting with all the unions were the one that was formed. No, I think you are not, okay. And that Moses might be so I think that so the point is that they say about visibility was community activists in the world. So on the March of 1991, 92, and 93, activists kind of went out and defended. I've spoken to about defended those marches.
Yeah.
So there's a broader community of support, particularly against the crazy Christians who kind of follow the marches, right? Kind of waving their violence. So I think that, you know, as we kind of think about questions of disability in economies, is to also try and get to those other organizations, including the trade unions, and Sancto, ANC, is very active in this, in supporting what is going on. So they kind of this layering that needs to kind of appear as you think through the politics, issues of disability, and how global members were part of those organizations, and some people not.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Prof.
Doesn't seem like there are any other questions, but thank you for a wonderful presentation. Beautiful paper. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading the final, more polished draft.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Muted, and thank you everyone that joined us online. Yeah, we'll see.